On tonight's Cover One Buffalo podcast, powered by BetUS, we are joined by everyone's favorite computer cowboy, Ben Baldwin. But first, our guys, Handsome Jack.
Broadcasting live to Bills Mafia worldwide with Greg Tompsett and Aaron Quinn.
Welcome to the NFL. Doesn't matter what's happened before today. Today's a brand new day. It's a brand new season.
Your number one podcast for objective Buffalo Bills coverage. No matter where you are, we got you covered.
Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo podcast. You are joining your host, Greg Tompsett, along with my partner in crime, Aaron. How we doing?
I am doing pretty well, man. We had some real great elite Western New York fall weather here. And so even if I had complaints, nobody cares. Nobody wants to hear from you right now, Greg. So
we ate wings together yesterday.
Yeah,
got to hang out with Drew Gear and Chris over at Rockpile and Del Reed, and had all of us had never had 911 Tavern before, and and honestly, it lived up to the hype. Like, it was good. Those were really, really good. Like, the sauce was great, and we had some pizza logs and some crazy chunky French fries. It was good.
Yeah, I don't know about you. You had a long car ride home, but as soon as I got over to my car, I had to loosen up my belt. It was a little snug. Like, stuff was getting a little uncomfortable. Yeah.
Well, and it's funny. You don't often hear almost everyone ask them, "Oh, how was the service?" Like, to a weird point. And I was like, you want to know what? It was noticeably really good. Like, it was
even with Drew being kind of rude.
Yeah, even with Drew Gear there, like, it was noticeably great service. It was great. This is not a paid advertisement. By all means, I would love for 911 Tavern to sponsor us, but we just had a great time.
Yeah.
So obviously there's a lot going on. We are here tonight because it is Bills Seahawks week, not a regular matchup for us. So one that we only see every 4 years. And as we're kind of, going around the, our little social media world, we crossed over with someone that I think you and I interact with a ton on social media because of his data and his charts, maybe not as much because of his connection with the Seahawks, but we're going to blend those two tonight and welcome on everyone's favorite computer cowboy, our man Ben Baldwin. Ben, how we doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on. Like you guys are saying, I'm from Seattle. I'm a Seahawks fan, but I think I could call it a bias, but I love Josh Allen. I like watching the Bills play. So I'm not coming here to be like, the Seahawks are going to win. They're the greatest thing ever. I really support the Bills. And I think Josh Allen and the Bills have been good enough to deserves probably the wrong word, because there's not really a deserves in sports beyond winning and losing, but he's good enough to have won an MVP, to have won a Super Bowl. So I'm hoping that those things do come for him at some time, even though I'm not from Buffalo. I'm not a Bills fan, but I'm rooting for
you and us both.
I guess I just realized too, in that every week that I go to your site to look at different team data, whether it's the early passing situation stuff, whatever it is, that Seattle comes up first. And I guess I just realized now why. And I would do the same exact thing if I had a site and I can make it the Bills first. So kudos to you for sneaking that one in there.
I like it. So, obviously, Ben, let's talk a little bit first before we get into some of the fun. We do want to get into some of the awesome metrics and charts and visualizations you put together. Let's talk a little bit about this matchup first and some of the pieces that are there before we get into either side of the ball. It's been kind of an interesting up and down for the Seahawks so far this year. I think that there was maybe a little under the radar excitement coming in. Obviously, a lot of buzz around the 49ers coming up, another Super Bowl appearance, and always attention around teams in LA and the up and coming piece of Arizona. But I don't know, a lot of people were talking about the Seahawks, and then you rattle off 3 in a row. It's fantastic, and then a tough loss with the Lions, but a shootout, and just they're obviously a top tier team. But then the one with the Giants was just a real wake up call. And now again, a tough one with the 49ers and getting your bearings with a pretty dominant win against the Falcons. Where are the fans' heads at with Seattle of what to make of this team so far after such a weird up and then down and maybe back up a little bit now?
Yeah, it's been a little bit of a roller coaster with the head coaching change and the 3 wins coming into or starting off the season. And we knew at the time that these were probably going to be 3 of the quote unquote easiest games that the Seahawks were going to play. It was Bo Nix's first game in a road game in Seattle. Then the Seahawks played the Patriots, and then they played against the Dolphins in their first whole game without Tua. That was the first game the Dolphins had after that Bills game in week 2. So the Seahawks were 3-0, but at the same time, it was okay, let's wait and see what happens once they play against actual good teams. They lost to the Lions and 49ers by double digits. There was that kind of shocker of a home loss to the Giants, where the Giants didn't even have Malik Neighbors. They're by far their best offensive player, probably. So when you guys DM'd me asking if I wanted to come on this, I said sure, but I was also like, oh no, they have to play the Bills in 2 weeks. I didn't even think about this, and I didn't have that high of a hope. But then last week they went into Atlanta, had a very impressive wire-to-wire win against a Falcons team that had been playing pretty well this season after their week 1 loss. And now I think that instead of having like no chance at all, I think they have a chance of at least putting together a competitive game, although there's still a lot of question marks. DK Metcalf suffered an injury in that Falcons game. I would be kind of surprised if he played, although they haven't. I don't think they've made a determination yet. They just traded
one
their
of the
starting
rare
linebacker today.
One of the rare guys being carted off that end up being quite a bit more minor than a normal cart trip turns out to be.
Yes. They traded their starting linebacker today, so it's like not something you see for a team in first place very often. And they've had a lot of offensive line injuries, especially at right tackle. So there's definitely question marks, but definitely some encouraging signs, especially with how their defense looked against the Falcons after getting some guys back from injury, especially their first round pick, Byron Murphy, who looked really disruptive against the Falcons and definitely provided a lift to that defense.
Yeah, kind of on the same vein of like how you guys feel about the team this year. My question is how does the fan base kind of sort through where the team is going and what direction the Seattle Seahawks are heading in? Because it seems like by every metric and looking up for this matchup, they're very firmly right now at this point in the season like the 10th to 12th best team in the league by every metric, and that's like a weird spot to be, right? Because I don't know that they have Gino's playing really well and they've got some nice pieces, but I don't know that it's a Super Bowl window. Like you can get a punch a playoff ticket and maybe make a run. Is that kind of the mindset that the fan base is in? Is like, hey, we've got some good enough pieces to make a run. But then what's that future beyond what is he now, 34-year-old Geno Smith look like into the future with this team and the roster as it is? And like, if you're too good, you don't get in the range to pick a good quarterback for the future. And you got Sam Howell in the backup. Like, so where is the idea of like, okay, we're probably more competitive right now than we thought that we would be at this point. And that's cool and that's fun and it's a fun team, but like, what's the future look like? Where's the fan base sort of sorting through that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And adding to this complication of maybe being a little bit better now than we expected is the fact that all of the other teams in their division have a losing record right now. So it's like, maybe we have a chance to actually win this division. Although when they played the 49ers, they didn't look super competitive in that game. But if the 49ers keep losing, then it doesn't matter if they
keep losing players.
Or keep losing players. Yeah, one or the other. Games and or players.
Yeah. But it is kind of a strange dichotomy where a lot of the energy is we have a new coach, we're building this program, trying to get momentum. A lot of their exciting players have been drafted in the most recent few years. And then at the same time, yes, there's this starting quarterback that was a journeyman for most of his career, is in his mid-30s and is under contract, I think only through next season. Maybe they'll extend him after that and try to kind of keep it going forward. But if you're thinking about like the long-term future and the quarterback that this regime is going to be tied to, I would be surprised if it were Geno Smith. But on the other hand, I think he's playing well enough that you can't just like let him walk without any succession plan. So it is kind of a strange spot that they find themselves in.
Yeah. Let's jump right into this offensive side of the ball since we were kind of talking about quarterback specifically here. But one thing I want to ask you about in this matchup, and I think it's probably the big thing that all Bills fans are kind of trying to figure out here, is this DK Metcalf injury. And I've heard from some reporters that like he's going to try to play. There is a chance that he's going to be able to play. We know that guys have it's an MCL, right? For Metcalf.
I think so.
Yes. And so I think people have played on that. What does that look like, whether he plays in a limited capacity or doesn't play at all? Like, how much does that shift what it is Seattle's trying to do? We know that, you know, they want to target him one-on-one in the red zone. They want to get him in space on third downs, one-on-one. Is there something else that they can do in that passing game to set up the one-on-ones? Like, I still like JSN. I still like Tyler Lockett, but without DK Metcalf, that feels a lot more toothless and more normal. Some of the more other teams that we've played feels more similar to that. What is their approach with a limited or no DK Metcalf in the passing game?
Yeah, I think it really does limit them, and there's a lot less that a defense has to worry about if you aren't always having to be thinking, oh, do I have a safety over the top of DK Metcalf? Am I like, you really don't want to leave it doesn't matter who the corner is. You really don't want to leave a cornerback on an island with DK Metcalf because it's just like there's too much of a chance that it's going to go for a 60-yard touchdown and that like those plays really
or DPI.
Yep. Yep. And without that element, Tyler Lockett is still good. He's definitely played even better this season than I might have expected, given that he's crossed 30, but I don't think he's quite as explosive as he used to be. And Jackson Smith-Njigba, who was very highly regarded wide receiver prospect, was taken in the first round last year. Still have really high hopes for him, but he hasn't quite, maybe found his footing in the NFL is quite the right, is the right term. And maybe some of this is because he does have Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf ahead of him. And maybe if DK weren't out there to absorb so many targets, then he would have his chance to shine. But I would still worry from the Seahawks perspective that it would be a lot easier to defend if we didn't have this kind of constant threat of DK out there.
Yeah. And then kind of my other point here, and I think this is for Bills fans, the big concern is what they've given up. You look at the Jets game and what Breece Hall was able to do, and struggling Breece Hall at the time, really gashing the Bills. And obviously Derrick Henry's gashing everybody, but he definitely also gashed the Bills. And that has been sort of Achilles heel a little bit of the Sean McDermott defense is if you can get some really good, tough to tackle backs out in space, the Bills are a little lacking in athleticism in the defensive back room, and they're a little bit smaller with linebackers and stuff. And so you can break some of those big runs. You talked about some of the injuries at offensive line. I want to kind of tie the two positions together because we talked about this a little offline. In the offensive line stats that you had posted this week, I was shocked to see how good Seattle's run blocking statistics were, because when I turned on the tape and I watched Kenneth Walker, a lot of these runs are coming out of structure of the play design and out of the offense, and he's just cutting things back and making guys miss and doing crazy Kenneth Walker the third things. So, you know, kind of long question here, but how do you stop this Seattle run game? And is it just winning the one-on-ones against the line? Because I see a lot of teams winning one-on-ones against the line and Kenneth Walker still winning the rep. How do you slow that down?
Yeah, I think that's a lot of it is winning the battles at the point of attack and then trying to bring down Kenneth Walker. And he does look great this year. Last year, he was, I think, playing through nagging injuries for a lot of the year. And at least from my perspective, I kind of forgot who he could be when he was fully healthy, full go. And we've definitely seen that version of Kenneth Walker this year. And or at least when he's been playing, he did miss a couple of weeks with injury. But since he's come back, he's looked back to his complete, fully healthy self.
Yeah. And just before I give you to Greg, as a Michigan fan, I've always known what Kenneth Walker is capable of doing to a team because he destroyed Michigan all those times.
So as we kind of switch over here, obviously the big topic is the Tyrel Dodson revenge game. So, so obviously Dodson did have a really nice run here and had a great developmental curve. And then we were really happy to see him get a chance to come in and kind of start and flourish in a every down role. I think he's done even more than I would have expected. In New Orleans, and I think part of that, or in New Orleans, in Seattle, and I think part of that is because of the defensive line play in front of them. We know every linebacker is able to, look good and do their job when you have guys wreaking havoc in front of them. And, I think Leonard Williams was a really savvy trade when they brought him over, but it really seems like it's come together with drafting Byron Murphy. And I know, if quarterback wins aren't a stat, defensive tackle wins certainly aren't a stat, but it is pretty remarkable how big of a difference it's been in those matchups. So I know like the stat line hasn't been there for Byron Murphy, but it seems like the domino effect of what he's able to do in not allowing double teams in Leonard Williams, keeping the linebackers clean, and then disrupting some on his own as well has really been a really impactful addition.
Yeah, and if you're a defensive tackle, you're not going to be racking up stats, and what you're hoping for is just a few splash plays in the game to try to turn the tide of the game. And at least against the Falcons I think it was both of Kirk Cousins' interceptions. If you look at them, you can see he kind of had to hurry the ball because Murphy was beating his man. And if you're a rookie defensive tackle, then that's exactly what your team wants out of you.
Yeah, obviously it's one of the, traditionally one of the slower developing positions out there. So to already be able to make those, and then again, another in-season move, picking up a Roy Robertson Harris, like just a good, savvy veteran that can come in and make contributions, helps it. But you talked about it in, I don't know if it was pre-show or if it was as we were in the open here, but I was all ready to talk about the linebacking core, and now all of a sudden we get like the back-to-back matchup with Ernest Jones. Where in the world did that come from?
Yeah, so the whole linebacker saga of the Seahawks, at least for me, is pretty interesting. So last year they had Bobby Wagner and Jordan Brooks.
Jordan Brooks.
Jordan Brooks in the first round. He played out his rookie contract, and they let him walk in free agency to the Dolphins. They signed Dodson and Baker to replace them. There was a lot of groaning from Seahawks fans after this because you had two established guys that the fan base was very familiar with, and they let both of them walk. And I think this has definitely been the weakest part of the team, and especially the play of Jerome Baker, which nobody's going to be surprised to hear, given that he was traded in the middle of the week as their starting linebacker. I think he played over 90% of the snaps in each of Seattle's last 3 games. And so he was their starting linebacker, and they're like, okay, this is just not working for us. So they flipped into the Titans and are now going to be trying something new. But I think if there's a weak part in Seattle's defense, it's the intermediate middle where the linebackers are responsible for.
Honest to God, I cannot remember the last player-for-player trade in season at the same position with 2 starting players. Like, it's just, it's wild that, like, hey, are you kind of semi-unhappy with what your guy is doing? Maybe we'll be happy with your guy instead. It's just such a weird swap.
It's also funny because I think the Seahawks gave up more than the Titans did to get him originally, even though they're renting him for part of a season, and he originally came from the Rams. So it's like the Titans tricked the Rams into taking him, and now he's at a Rams divisional rival. I saw some Rams fans grumbling about this because now he's on the Seahawks after 7 games.
Sometimes there's a little silver lining if you can stick it to a rival fan base and they're upset about it. That's a good thing. We enjoyed that for a moment because everybody kind of knew that the Chiefs were going to be going after Amari Cooper, and like, ha, we got him. And now they got DeAndre Hopkins. They're like, well, screw you guys anyways.
Or kind of how Jerry got a little bit of the short end of the stick with him trading for Amari, and then Cleveland trading for Amari, and us giving Cleveland more than Jerry got.
Yes, correct.
For Amari years later.
We gave Cleveland more for 30-year-old Amari Cooper than he got for 26 or 27-year-old
that
Amari
little
Cooper.
Side jab at Jerry Jones in there.
Anything to screw Jerry.
Yeah.
All right, so Ben, obviously, we're excited about the matchup. That's going to be fun. But the real reason we had you on here is to talk about data and charts. That's what all the fans want to hear, or even the ones that don't. They're stuck now because they're going to listen anyways. Yep. Yeah, they got to listen anyways. So, for anybody who follows Aaron and I on, on Twitter, you see us share this every week and interact with different ones and share individual ones from it. But if you're not, make sure that you're following Ben. He's a fantastic follow and a very, very, fun person to be able to get the different information and ways to look at just different sides of football. And one of the simplest ones here is just kind of the balance of, EPA and, EPA per play and offense and defense. And that, ultimately this leads into another question we'll talk about here of kind of ranking players and following. Chris just put up the handle here at Ben Baldwin to make sure you can follow him on Twitter as well. And this just kind of helps lay out where teams are leaning into, how much is, teams like the Vikings with the ridiculous, calls that Brian Flores is making, and Washington with how Cliff Kingsbury is rejuvenating that offense, and then kind of the balance of the Lions and the Bills, where I know you've commented a couple times here as the weeks have gone by, is like, hey, guys, the Bills are still good. And that it's good to see, that some of that week to week individual ups and downs kind of gets washed out a little bit in this view.
Yeah. Sorry.
Good. No, go ahead.
I think I was on the show at around this time last year, and we looked at this, and I was like, the Bills are one of the best teams in the NFL. They're probably going to be there at the end. Their goal is to stay healthy, and they'll be in the mix at the end. Last year, they didn't even stay healthy, and they still had a shot in the playoffs. So they're no surprise, but they're still up there as one of the best teams in the league this year.
Hey, Ben, by the way, this is a segment for our sponsor, William Mattar. This is our Here to Help segment. And one thing I would love your help with, because this is a constant fight that I have on the internet, going back to last year before we had you on, so much of fan base is not totally into the new data yet, even though it's been around for a long time. And I think a lot of people are confused about, like, they see these charts and they see, all of us at Cover One saying it, like last year with the Ken Dorsey and the offense, and being like, okay, but the EPA is really good and success rate, all these things are showing up well, but it doesn't always translate to how you see and feel the game, right? And we're not always comparing to our peers, which is why I think your charts are great, because it does give you a level of comparison to the league. But real quick, can you go over some of, like, a layman's basic kind of terms of what is EPA and why does this matter? Why is it so much better than just dealing with basic? I just heard Colin Cowherd this week talking about the Seattle Bills matchup, and he talked about how, the Seattle run game is so much worse than their passing game. And that's because he looked up yardage statistics. If you actually look up stuff like EPA and DVOA, they're both like kind of 10th in the NFL across the board. So why are people still using that data when EPA exists? And can you just kind of give us a quick rundown of what is EPA and why does that matter?
Yeah. So EPA is based on, so what does EPA stand for? So this is expected points added, and it's based on expected points, and expected points basically just tries to put a numeric value on each possible position you can have the ball in. So this means the down, the distance, and where on the field you are. So for example, if you're an offense and you have the ball first and goal at the opponent's 5, you're very likely to score a touchdown. So the expected outcome on that drive is very good. So your expected points is very high. If it's 3rd and 20 on your own 5-yard line, then you're going to have low expected points because the opponent is probably going to be the next team that scores. So how do we get from expected points to expected points added? It's just looking at the difference in expected points from before the play to after the play. So if you have a 1st and 10 at your own 20-yard line and you have a gain of 15 yards, you're getting a first down, you're moving closer to the opponent's side of the field, and you're going to have positive expected points. Why is this better than looking at something like just yards? I think the primary problem with yards, and especially when broken down into passing yards and rushing yards, is it doesn't tell you how many plays those yards came from. So for example, let's say we're looking at a really bad team and we're trying to figure out if they had a good passing defense and rushing defense. If that team was always behind in games, then the opponents are going to have no reason to ever throw the ball against them. So maybe their passing defense will look good because they're always down by 30 points and opponents are going to stop calling passing plays. But that doesn't necessarily tell us if they have a good passing defense or not. It just tells us that,
you mean the Panthers didn't have the best pass defense in the league last year?
Yes. That's a good example. If you're ahead of the Panthers by 40-0, then what's the point of even calling a pass play? You're just going to hand it off until the game's over because you already won the game. So you don't even need expected points added per play to improve on that, you could just look at yards per play, like passing yards per play allowed and rushing yards per play allowed. And even that by itself would be a lot better than just raw passing yards and rushing yards allowed. But the advantage of expected points is that it also takes into account like a 6-yard gain on 3rd and 10 is not as valuable as a 6-yard gain on 1st and 10, for example. So it tries to kind of contextualize how much each play is helping you.
And I know one that, a lot of fans, like to see is where it goes through and you see the movement and things like the betting market odds and where it ranks some of the teams. And Aaron, I know you kind of see that sometimes it helps levels that we feel like there's sometimes teams like all the way in their own tier or in totally different worlds from other ones. And sometimes it's healthy to see where some of the balance is where you marked it. And I know I was looking at the other one for tiers. I'll pull it up here in a moment. That kind of showed that there's like a huge group all in the same first tier from market driven odds right now.
Yeah, it's different than last year, where I think last year was like the 49ers, Chiefs, and maybe Bills were at the top for a lot of it.
Bills were like in and out of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And now here it is. There's the Lions and Packers are also definitely in the mix, and Ravens too.
Well, there was that stretch last year where the Ravens were like breaking DVOA and like shattering every metric at one point.
They're still trying.
They're still working on it.
I got a question for you on this market drive team tiers one, and it has nothing to do with the actual data, but every time I see this, I wonder, are your mentions littered with fans telling you that the information's not correct? Because I feel like people are going to take this the wrong way, and like that
he's individually ranking them.
Oh yeah, for sure. So yeah, there's a lot of that thinking that I made them myself, but a lot of them like thinking that teams are misplaced, and I kind of get it, because like, how do you look at the Jets and think that they're a contender? So maybe this is partially my fault because I'm the one like putting the labels on the actual tiers. And are the Jets contenders right now? Maybe not. But in terms of like, why is their rating so high? If you look at, they have a game against the Texans in week 9, and it is in New York, but they're favored against the Texans. So the betting market thinks that the Jets are good. I don't know why. Not my decision. I would not bet on the Jets, but that's what they have right now. So that's how they're still at this.
That's surprising, because Vegas is like really good.
Yeah.
So that brings me, how do you deal with those crazy, like I call it like the Cowboys tax or the Steelers tax, where you have teams with so many fans that that they kind of get like an extra half a point or a point against them, because like Vegas almost has to lean that way, because there's going to be so many people betting on them that we got to be kind of careful. I don't ever think of the Jets in that world, but
No.
I also know sometimes there's some anchoring when you have like so much money invested preseason in a crazy like media driven hype machine. Like I almost wonder, can they like just not afford to recalibrate the Jets because they're already so committed to it? I don't know. It's crazy.
My somewhat uninformed guess is that might be more of a factor when it comes to the Super Bowl odds. I think we just had that chart up.
Yeah, I think I have that one right here.
I think those markets might be slightly less efficient because the payoff is so far in the future. But my understanding is that like the weekly betting on NFL games, the markets for those are very efficient just because of the money involved. So like by the time you get to the closing line on game time, then even if there's a big team involved, then the markets are pretty good. But maybe there is like, I'm looking at these, I guess the teams with high Super Bowl odds right now aren't really the teams that you would think would have a lot of public money on them. Like that everyone's
obviously,
Cowboys.
Just having the Cowboys and the Steelers not on the screen, or I guess the Steelers way over here, but is a pretty good indicator. Although the Cowboys, I would say the Cowboys just being on the screen is the indicator. Like that is the indicator that like there's still some like that they just can't be rid of them. They can't do it. All right, Ben, we've taken.
I got one more. I got one more question for Ben
before we ask him for a prediction.
Here, one more for Ben here. What would be, so like I know recently, I forget who it was, called out your bot your fourth down bot of like, whoa, this is where analytics is dumb or whatever like that. And I forget who it was that responded to it, but is that the other aspect of the content that you produce that people just argue with you the most on? Like, because that's not you're not putting that information out real time, right? That's an algorithm saying what is the right decision to make in this scenario. And it's just a bot posting. And then I always see people being like, well, yeah, you don't know. Like, is that the other thing that gets the most contentious content back?
I think in the past it did. And yes, that was certainly a recent example. I think it was Michael Lombardi.
That's what it was, Lombardi. Yes.
Who really didn't.
Yes.
Who wasn't
riding the coattails of others to Super Bowls. Yeah.
I think the hate for the fourth down stuff has gone down a lot in recent seasons, and especially since Brandon Staley retired. For some reason, like the Chargers were just a magnet for hate on, like, people just did not like him and everything he represented. So whenever I try to defend his decisions, people did not like that. But I think it's almost become so routine in a lot of cases that most of the people who really fought really hard of it have kind of like given up, or at least been less vocal about it. Michael Lombardi accepted.
other than traditionalists. And I think part of it is, like in every other sport, with the proliferation of information and data and just getting used to it, it now becomes it's harder to push back, because people are like, well, yeah, this is why it makes sense. It's, before the second score 2-point conversion, like the 15-point 2-point conversion, the 16-point 2-point conversion, where like, yeah, you're right, you need to get it. And that I even get a little bit of the, whether it's momentum or whether it's other things, like I get a little bit of the mental gymnastics of, yeah, but keeping the team in it when they know they're only down one score has value. And like, okay, but eventually people get the idea that, listen, having more information earlier and knowing whether you get it or not just starts to build and build and build. It's that snowball that, like, eventually people are like, oh, well, yeah, okay, that makes sense. And you start to look at the different percentages of going for two at the end, rather than trying to kick it and going to overtime and trying to win again. And just some of those have slowly just become accepted logical solutions. Not before, it was like, well, that's like some nerdy thing I can't understand, and that doesn't make sense in what I've watched. And now it becomes like, oh, well, I've had enough people explain any of those. Those are just three examples with some of the different pieces. And I think it fits into fourth down. We're like, oh yeah, we probably weren't going for it enough for a long, long time. And that's becoming more accepted. So it's not going to be pushed back on as much.
Yeah, I definitely think there's something to that, where it's not really like a new novel thing anymore, that people are like, oh, this is new and different, so it must be wrong because it's different than what people have been doing forever. This is the, I think, 5th season that the bot has been tweeting stuff, so it's like it's been around for a while. I think another factor is that some of the pretty conservative coaches retired and have been replaced with more open-minded coaches. And to tie this back to the Seahawks Bills game, the Seahawks are a great example of this, where Pete Carroll has mostly been, or I should be talking in the past tense here, was mostly conservative on fourth downs, and was replaced by Mike McDonald, a coach in his 30s, who has talked very openly about Seattle's process for when we get to first down. I know the distance that we need to be able to go for it on fourth down. This can inform our play calls. There's somebody in my headset talking to me throughout all this, and you would never hear Pete Carroll talking about these decisions like this. So I think as coaches and organizations are also more open to it and explaining their processes, it's easier for fans to understand what they're doing. And even if there are some media members that have been around forever and not quite on board, if the team is explaining what they're doing, then I think fans are open to learning from that too.
Is it true that Antonio Pierce broke the bot with that one punt? Do you happen to remember? I almost want to go back and look. Was that one of the farthest differentials that the bot's seen of, like, recommended versus decision?
It was. I think it was definitely up there. There've been a couple, like, the ones that it really, really likes the least are like really, really, really long field goal attempts when you should be going for it. So it didn't quite get up to snuff there. I think the
I know
worst one
in punt alone, whoever does the cowardly punt one, I think it legitimately ranked like number one in the rankings of the most cowardly punt in the modern era.
I think the worst one was Russell Wilson's first game in Denver when they had that Monday night game in Seattle, and they had and Nathaniel Hackett, of course, decided to kick a 64-yard field goal instead of going for it, and it was like longer than any field goal that has ever been made outdoors, I think, and it was in Seattle too, and I think that was the one that the bot liked the least.
Shockingly, it didn't go in.
Yeah.
Shocking that it was Hackett.
Yeah. I am shocked by this information. All right. Well, you've been very generous with your time here, but we appreciate it. We'll get you out of here on one last piece here. What do you expect to see come Sunday afternoon? What do you expect to see in this game between Buffalo and Seattle? And give us a score prediction.
Yeah, this is so hard because of the uncertainties we talked about, and especially DK Metcalf. If DK were out there 100%, I would say I think there are some universes where the Seahawks offense is able to keep up with the Bills and make this a game. But given the uncertainty, I'm not sure if I would go that far. So I'll say like 30-20 Bills.
Okay. So if you like that call from Ben here, you can use our friends at BetUS. Use promo code YouTube150. You can get 150% the bonus on your first deposit, up to $2,000, and 125% on your second and third deposits as well. Fast payout, super easy format to use. Make sure you check out our friends over at BetUS. And Ben, what's anything else you have coming up here that you're going to be working on that the fans can look forward to check out on your feed?
I'm on Twitter at Ben B. Baldwin and have the Fourth Down bot. So if you're interested in any of the number stuff we talked about today, then that's the place to check me out. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it. Thanks for making time for us.
You know, as we talked about it here, this is not just simply because he's a guest on the show. Very literally, it's one of the first things our staff looks for come like the Monday after the game or Tuesday after the Monday night game is where all the charts come out and we start to dig through them and look at everything. So it's something that's absolutely part of our routine. So we appreciate
I'm on your site 2 to 3 times
all the work that you do, Ben. It's fantastic.
Thank you. Appreciate it. That's why I do it, and hopefully in hope that some people find it useful.
We appreciate you and your time. All right. Thanks, Ben. Oh, so awesome to be able to have Ben on again and to talk through. And I think your question was great, Aaron, to kind of help people understand, why we use that data and how it kind of helps clarify and bring a little bit more kind of, like you talked about, like relative level setting. It makes it much more apples to apples in some of the comparisons and helps take away some of that garbage time noise and some of that volume of play noise that's in there in
or
a lot
like
of stats.
Even with the yardage stuff, like he was talking, even if you go to yards per, that's better than total yardage, but then there's still so many flaws in that. Like you could have a big run and then a bunch of little runs and your yards per looks pretty good, but was the running game successful? And I think trying to find what successful football looks like is the goal of charting through data, and also then trying to, I think we have ideas, and this is a constant debate we have, right, Greg, is we have ideas, and I think we hyper focus on the Bills, and so we are often like, this is part of this team's not good enough, or we're not good enough at this thing that it feels like it, and then it's like, okay, well, let's like pull it back and compare it to the league, and then now you have these data sets and charts and the ability to create these charts where you can show the fan base like, okay, yeah, it does feel that way, but actually the whole league is bad at this thing, and the Bills are kind of in the middle, or whatever it is. You can create those charts as visualizations to show like it's not as bad as it feels, or no, you're right, it's terrible, it's worse, when here's the chart to show it.
Well, and because there are some, we talked about that pre-show when we were going over it with Ben. The one that stuck out to me was the Bills are actually better in pass blocking than run blocking.
Yeah.
And I would have lost money if you had a bar bet. I would have owed you a drink if somebody bet me which one was better or where it was. The opposite direction is where my brain would have gone. And sometimes having the data and information to back it up, and we're getting to the point now with 7 games. There's early in the season, you have that small sample size noise where sometimes like a Jacksonville game can really skew the numbers one direction, or a Baltimore game can skew it the other direction. Well, now with 7 games, like we've got a pretty healthy sample size of the numbers, whether it's DVOA, whether it's EPA. And Eric, I know, always leans a lot into success rate. And I think there's really something savvy to that, because it takes out a lot of that big play noise you talked about, where the 87 yarder in the grand scheme of things, if you're talking about predictive elements, the average per play doesn't translate, because that one big play is just one big play and it's not actually as predictive. Whereas consistently being successful, that, hey, do you stay ahead of the sticks? Are you getting more yards than you normally need to convert first downs, or more than halfway on first down? Those are a lot more predictive of future success than the average per play is, because it can be skewed by a big loss or a big gain that it gives a lot of noise in the numbers.
Yeah, I think there's just a super frustrating thing. Stats are cool when the Bills are in the top right column on a chart. Everyone wants to share those stats. When it doesn't confirm our priors, I think people get mad at data and they don't want anything to do with it, and they'll yell at you for posting charts. And I always urge people, like, the data is fun, and I spend a lot of time in the data, and it's a portion of the answer, because a lot of the times the data also doesn't tell the full story, right? So it's data plus film. It's always been that way. The problem is the average fan doesn't have time to consume hours and hours of data and also go back and compare it to the film. So having charts like this, where, like, if you don't have time to sit down and watch film, understandable, but at least you have these baseline metrics for some of these things. And Ben does a great job of showing some of this stuff. And then Aaron Schatz, another friend of the show, with FTN Fantasy and DVOA, where he kind of takes it even a step further with some of the nuance of using things like EPA, but then weighing it against the opponents and league averages, things like that, and creates like even more nuanced predictive stats. Nobody, no matter if you like what the data is suggesting or not, with how advanced those stats are and how they've actually historically also proven out over tons of samples now, over multiple seasons with running these data points, good teams score well in these data points. And so, like, more times than not, you want to be ahead on these things, regardless of how you feel if you don't agree with the data.
So here's one this one, I think there's, as I look, some of the sample sizes here where you're talking about 5 instances, 8 instances, 4 instances for the number one team. That's small enough where this will shake out a little bit more. But this is
one decision moves you so much up and down.
Correct. So the Bills were consistently like number 1, number 2 the last couple of years in leaning into the analytics of when they said to go for it or not go for it. And there's obviously been, the Bills right now are, so they're 24 or 25th in the league, or maybe 23rd. That's a huge difference. And some of that is, we talked about our frustration with some of Sean McDermott's kind of gutalytics of like, hey, I don't love that you're deciding in the moment when you think you should and shouldn't follow the analytics. That's not what that's for. You should lean into and trust the numbers over the larger sample size. But we've also seen the offense not give him a ton of confidence in some of these situations where,
or Tyler Bass not give him the confidence.
The same, because the same idea, we're not at the top in when to go for field goals or not go for field goals. And it's because, well, can you blame him on what Tyler Bass has been showing here? So some of those things I think will shake out. Some of those, obviously, we saw the offense take a step in the right direction here in that second half last week, and are hopeful that kind of keeps going. That will lean into, and I think that will snowball into more aggressive, consistently trusting the analytics in going for it versus when to take a field goal, and the good side of both of those decisions, hopefully going forward, because we saw 6 made kicks from Tyler Bass. So hopefully the confidence in both those areas, in the offense to convert and in the field goal kicker and Tyler Bass's ability to make kicks, hope those both give him more confidence.
Yeah, I agree. We got to do our predictions.
Yeah. So again, I'm going to bring up our friends here at BetUS, and
I think it's your turn first this week as well.
Yeah, it is. I've lagged behind you the last couple. Although last week you went first and you literally picked my score, and I had to change my score on the fly.
I got close to being right. I think like 27.
You said 27-17.
27-17. It was looking that way, and then the Bills flipped that right at the end.
They got another score late with the Ray Davis one. Otherwise, it was right there. So I Ben is spot on because I'm in the exact same boat. With a healthy DK Metcalf, I think home field advantage is largely overblown in the NFL. This is one of the places where it's not. Like
And the
Seattle is
travel.
a tough place. It's as far as we go for any game.
Yeah.
It's a really legitimate home field advantage. This is a legit tough road situation and circumstance. You're playing a really talented team who is got the right guys back. They're not fully healthy. There's a couple things I'm gonna bring up here. So we saw DK Metcalf. Leonard Williams is just a rest day, and Kenneth Walker illness. We certainly need to watch that because that I'm assuming is going to work out just fine.
Yeah.
But you
Some
don't
liquid
even
IV
see.
will fix that.
Yeah. You don't even see Byron Murphy on the list anymore. He played last week and looked like his same dominant self. Julian Love's probably been maybe their most consistently good defender on their defense. So obviously need to watch that. They have some injury things here. Reek Woolen is their CB1. That's, something where it's, all of these are impactful. So we got to watch how this progresses as the week goes. But DK is the only one that I think is right now at risk of missing the game. That's a real impactful player. So without DK Metcalf, I really feel good about our corners against good players in Tyler Lockett and Jackson Smith and Jigba, but I'll take that matchup with Rasul Douglas and Christian Benford, 7 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
DK Metcalf is actually one of the guys where the reason that Douglas and Benford are so good is because of their ability to use that physicality and to be like the bigger, stronger, tougher player in the matchup. That's real hard to do when the other guy's DK Metcalf, where he's not only faster than both of our guys, but he's stronger than both of our guys. And I don't know that it's the difference in me picking a win or a loss. I don't know that all of a sudden I would pick the Bills to lose, but I would have, that is just a really tough matchup for our guys because of just strength on strength, like what we're good at. They're not used to guys being able to push back stronger than them. Like that's just not. Christian Benford is the stronger guy in almost every matchup he goes against. You're not when it's DK Metcalf, and that really gives me a little bit of anxiety. So if he's not able to play, and right now I don't think he's going to play. Obviously, it sounds like there's a possibility. It's not a definitive that he's out, but I don't think that he's going to play. I think that really is a pretty big factor for this game, and that gives me kind of a confidence to think that it's going to be there for the Bills. And I have it at 27-20. I think the Bills are able to get a win. I think that they're going to be able to kind of, move the ball. I don't think we're going to run the ball as easily as we have. Like I think last week's a good example where it's not exactly the same as Tavondre Sweat and Jeffrey Simmons, but Leonard Williams and Byron Murphy are pretty close, and they have a good rotation on that defensive line. And bringing in, Jaron Reed is a nice player that traded for Roy Robertson Harris. Jonathan Hankins is their backup. Like they have good depth, especially in the middle. I actually think they're better in the middle than they are on the outside. And, again, Tyrel Dodson, I'm very comfortable going at him in the pass game, but we've seen what he can do in the run game. Like he can come forward and tackle. He's certainly very good in the run game. So I think it's going to be tough to run the ball against them the way that we want. I think that we will still stick to it because we want play action to work and to do those things. But I think it's a game where we're going to need to pass the ball and we're going to need to move it against the secondary. And they have some, both Trey Brown and Tariq Woolen are dinged up. First time we'll really be able to see Devin Witherspoon. I know a lot of people are huge fans of his, and that'll be a fun matchup to watch with the receiving core. But I've got 27-20, and I think, if DK Metcalf plays, I think it's a coin flip, last team with the ball kind of situation.
Yeah, I have so many score predictions actually scratched out on my notes, trying to figure out where this game is, because I respect Seattle actually quite a bit, and I respect the travel out to the West Coast like this quite a bit. And I have concerns with the Bills, as good as I think they are, and as good as they've played at times this year. I am concerned about the slow start the last couple of weeks, and I'm concerned when the offense is not rewarding the defense at times. And I think you can get away with it against Tennessee. I don't know that you can get away with it with teams that are well balanced. And that's the Seattle, to me, feels like one of the more well-balanced teams in the league, when whether it's the data or you look at them on film. Like, they don't necessarily do anything great, but they're doing everything well, and that's tough. And Sean McDermott talks about that stuff all the time, right? Playing complementary football and playing fundamental football, and this team's kind of doing that, and that makes it tough out, especially traveling, long travel. And so I'm a little concerned on this one. I do have the Bills winning this. My prediction is 24-23 for this game. I have it Tyler Bass hitting a game winner here, and giving us a little bit of confidence. This would be great for him on the road. Lots of noise, tough place to kick. Want to see him do it. I think the Bills will be able to score. I think they'll be able to put together scoring drives. I don't think it's going to be one of those days where they just go out and do it. I think it's going to be a slow start to this game, feeling out. I think they're going to try to run. I don't think it's going to your point, I think they'll try to do some of that first down running stuff, put themselves behind the chains a little bit, struggle to get over that early. And I think Seattle will be able to break some runs. I think they'll be able to put together some drives with running the ball. And I think the mix of, even without a DK Metcalf, that mix of, I do like JSN, I do like Lockett, Noah Fant. I think they can present enough problems to go on 2 to 3 nice sustained drives against this Bills defense. Maybe they get a couple field goals. Maybe they sneak in a touchdown. And I think they're up late, 23-21. And I think, the Bills come down and put together a nice game-winning drive to set Bass up for nothing crazy, nothing like a 50-yarder, but a nice within range, 37 to 44-yard field goal to give him that confidence that I think he really needs, and for them to drive him out there for a game winner. And you fly back with a close win, and it doesn't feel great, but Seattle's a good team. And I think if you could walk away with a win, traveling like that, not playing your best football right now, that'd be huge for the Bills. But dude, I will not be shocked if this is one of those ones where the Bills travel out west, look a little sluggish, slow start, and Seattle hops on them like that. This is a team that could do it, especially with that run game. If they can get up,
do not
early,
give them a lead.
That could be really tough for the Bills.
Yeah, do not give that Walker and Charbonnet combo a lead. We do not want anything to do with that. I know pre-show Ben talked about the injury at right tackle, and they've been on their fourth right tackle. I think that's a super, interesting opportunity. Maybe another big Greg Rousseau game. I love that they played him at left end that whole game and let him just go at a weak point. I'd love to see that again here and to really get Geno off the spot. And this is another game where we need to start fast. I don't know that we can come back from the 10-0 hole in the same way. Not that we can't come back, but it will be harder to come back from a 10-0 hole in Seattle than it was against Tennessee, where it was a little easier to pull that off.
Yeah.
All right. So again, if you like Aaron and I's picks or Ben's here, you can use promo code YouTube150, get 150% bonus on your first deposit of $2,000. Check out our friends over at BetUS. Anything else for the people before we close out here?
Yeah, no, there was a bunch of, I know Ron, which love your support, Ron, every single week. Member of the Cover One Discord, the One Pass membership, which if you haven't signed up for Cover One Pass, so awesome in there every single day. A lot of conversation this morning about Hopkins and what that means for Kansas City. And if we should be worried, if Twitter's probably not the place for that, come over to Discord. We could talk through that in there in a reasonable manner. But Ron was asking about trade candidates. I do think that's probably a topic. I know you did a list on safeties here this week. Eric in the DM group, we were talking that maybe we need to be looking at defensive tackle and some switching up some stuff there. And that maybe looks like an issue going forward. But I think maybe going forward here over the next couple of weeks, that might be something that we drop a little bit more in the shows here and talking about some candidates. And do the Bills need a trade? Like, where are they at in this roster construction? Is there anything out there that can put them over the top type of thing? Because I think that is the one thing fans are kind of wondering here as we get towards the trade deadline.
Yeah, I know, we're all in the same universe on the safety position where everybody thinks we have an opportunity to improve. That improvement, some people think it's going to come from Cole Bishop. Some people would like it to see Mike Edwards get a chance at it. Some think maybe more time on task with Hamlin and Rapp. Some want outside guys. I rattled off, Grant Delpit, Ron Matthew, Quandre Diggs, a handful of different guys like that maybe have a chance to come in and be an upgrade. And you could debate how much of an upgrade they would be over the guys that are there. And Eric brought up that a lot of the things that we have frustration with that we're placing on the safeties are because we're not getting home.
Well, you talked about the trickle down with Murphy, right? Just for Seattle.
Yeah. The defensive tackle wins. So I think that's going to be my next research project, is to dig through. I probably won't get to that to this weekend, but the same thing. And just for anybody who's curious how I go about doing those, I literally take the standings, I sort it by the whole league. I start at the bottom and I go to over the cap and I look at all the guys on their roster at that position. And then I look at age, upcoming free agency, who has a low salary and would be impactful enough to want to go after. And I just go through every single roster and I go through all the different ones and I'll pick out okay, who's the Goldilocks of, not so over the hill that they're so impactful, but usually not guys on a rookie deal that are still being evaluated or looking to be, brought back as a pillar for their current offense. A lot of times teams are more likely to
we're not
trade.
trading for DK Metcalf. Is that what you're trying to say?
Or I think in the chat, they were asking me if we could trade for Dexter Lawrence. I think that was the one that came up in the staff chat of sure, that sounds awesome.
Let's get Myles Garrett while we're at it.
Yeah, you get him too. But I am going to go through and look through defensive tackles. That's going to be my next project, is to figure out, hey, who is out there that maybe we're not thinking about on a team that's their season's not looking great and could still be impactful of what we're doing.
Yeah.
All right. And if you want to, as Aaron said, if you want to hear more about that, come hang out with us in the Cover One Discord channel. You can find it by joining cover1.net/onepass. You'll find the link here in the show description as well.
Yep. You got a Greg Tompsett sports show coming up this week, right?
I do. We're going to be going through tomorrow night, doing a breakdown and previewing all the matchups for this week, and then we'll do a quick recap during Sunday night. So pretty much every week on Thursday night football at halftime and Sunday night football at halftime, I'll jump on and do a quick preview of the matchups to watch and the recap of the week's games. So if you're just locked in on the Bills, you want to know. I usually talk about it in what the Bills need to root for. I use some of Uber Hansen's rooting interest article and talk about, hey, the results, what helped us, what hurt us, what things we're looking for in the matchups that are there, and some interesting things that will impact the playoff races as we go. So if you're looking for a quick recap to be able to get you up to speed and what happened in the rest of the games, come check out and come hang out with us.
Yep.
All right. That's going to do it for this week. This has been a lot of fun. Big thanks to our guest, Ben Baldwin, one of our favorite guests to be able to have on each week. And appreciate everything that he did for us tonight and all the work that he does with the data that he helps us with. But on behalf of producer Chris Kepner and Aaron Quinn, tonight's show has been brought to you by BetUS. They remind you to please gamble responsibly. And our friends over at BetUS Sportsbook and Casino want you to make good decisions with your gambling wagers. But on behalf of the entire team here at Cover One, I'm Greg Tompsett. You've been listening to the Cover One Buffalo podcast, and we are